Has my microphone been off this entire time? Yeah, I think it has. Well, that's disappointing. Not on the Twitter Spaces. On the podcast, the microphone's been off. So sorry about that. So this is going to sound like a truncated opening for those of you listening to the podcast, but I've been talking for like 6 minutes and the microphone button's been off. So 24/7. I'll re-record something at the end of this to put on the front end of the podcast. Sorry for those of you watching live on YouTube. But I've got a sci-fi movie appointment with my daughter, so I don't want this to go super, super long. I saw a lot of people coming at me on Twitter blaming Spencer Petras. Okay. I'm going to be blunt. All right. Because I don't earn my living from Hawkeye sports anymore. Thank goodness, because back in the day, this would have been like crushing because it would have like literally been financially a negative. It's not a very smart football opinion. Okay. Those of you that think Spencer Petras should have been benched and that Iowa needs to go a different direction at quarterback based upon what you've seen today, what you saw today, it's not a very smart football opinion. You don't know what you're talking about. I've never spoken a word to Spencer Petras. I've never spoken a word to any of his family or any of his friends. I throw that out there because there was once upon a time where I probably hung on to a quarterback a little too long and my objectivity was tainted relative to Jake Christensen because I did have a relationship at that time with his father, and I really liked Jake a lot. I don't know Spencer Petras. Don't know anybody around him. I do believe this after watching Iowa football every game of the Ferentz era, covering Kirk, knowing Kirk. I believe that Iowa is putting the quarterback out on the field that they believe gives them the best chance to win. By the way, Spencer Petras, his 12 consecutive victory snap as a starting quarterback just came to an end. Prior to today, he had the highest winning percentage of any starting quarterback. Now, I realize there's more to winning football games than just a quarterback. And as Iowa fans, boy, do we really know that. But what I'd like to ask those of you that are convinced that it's Petras and that going to Padilla would be the right thing to do or the best thing to do, please email me at hawkeyepodcast@gmail.com what your observations of Iowa's practices have been where you've seen Padilla outperforming Petras. Oh, you're not allowed in those practices? Okay. The I wantism doesn't work. I want. Because. Damn it. I want it. Sorry. Because the problem that Iowa has is their offensive line has not developed anywhere near where I thought they would be 7 weeks into the regular season. And if you can't see that from today's game, then there's no need for you and I to go back and forth on Twitter because I got no time for it. And you're not going to like what I have to say. Now, I recognize that what I'm saying right now, maybe even how I'm saying it right now, is pissing some of you off. And if it is, I will fall back onto this adage. If you throw a rock into a pack of dogs, the one that yelps is the one that you hit. Think about it. AKA, I don't care. I don't care. Because it's about the offensive line right now for this offense. Does Petras have his flaws? Yes. Does Tyrone Tracy have his flaws? Yes. At least one drop again today. It seems like it's a weekly thing. Are there a number of flaws? Absolutely, there are. But it's more than Petras. And I also realize and recognize why fans go to the 2 most obvious cards every time. Folks, I've hosted literally, when you add up my instant reaction podcasts, on top of my days hosting Sound Off, on top of my days hosting the Golden Harvest Hawkeye Huddle on WMT back in 2003, I've literally hosted 400 to 500 of these. Well, hang on a second. 400 to 500 would be a lot. Probably a couple hundred of these post-game reaction things. Hello, Winnie. And over 120 of them have involved taking phone calls from Iowa fans for hours after games. Okay. And then the other 100 and so, or maybe 80 or so, have involved spending the time on Twitter or emails or texts. Okay. So I've been there, done that. I'm one of the OGs. Okay. So I know why the OC and the quarterback get the crap that they do. They get that because most people, that's all that they understand and all that they watch in a game when it happens live. Okay. Now, I don't see everything live. That's why I go back and watch them sometimes 3 times, usually twice, because I want to focus in on line play, secondary, linebackers, things away from the ball. But today, after things really start sputtering, I didn't even watch Petrus. I watched the line because that's what the concern was. I mean, Karlaftis is a freaking war daddy. He's an NFLer. There's no doubt about it. He's an NFLer. Could have been if he would have come out this last year. He is tough to block. And I don't care who you're right. Tristan Wirfs could have done better. Right. There's no doubt Tristan Wirfs could have held his own today. But Tristan Wirfs ain't walking through that door. Right. So my criticisms of the offensive line aren't personal, and they're not said with any animosity. Iowa is starting 2 new faces at tackle. 2 new faces at tackle. Yes, they have Tyler Linderbaum at center and the best center in the sport. And Shooter's probably not at 100%. Ince couldn't go today. Colby was considered possibly a scratch for this game, and I don't know how many snaps he even played. So this offensive line was without 2 of its top 7 players today, too. That said, DeYoung was brutalized by Karlaftis. I think Richmond actually fared much better than DeYoung did. But nobody, other than Linderbaum, nobody had a good day on the offensive line. And that is why Iowa's offense did next to nothing today. I mean, they had 271 yards. They averaged 4.4 yards per play. But, they put up 7 points, and they got to the red zone 5 times, and they scored 1 touchdown. Well, John Petrus was picked off 4 times. He was picked off 3 times when Purdue's dropping 8 late in the game when the game was over, okay? That's another thing. People kept coming at me. Oh, John, what do you think of that now? He just got in. There's 2 minutes left, and I was down by 3 possessions. And Purdue is dropping 8 players back into pass coverage, all right? Please, just learn more of the game before you want to have opinions like an a-hole, right? And again, if some of this rubs you the wrong way, if you think I'm an arrogant dickhead from all this, I don't care. My intent is not to be arrogant. My intent is to challenge you to watch football through a prism of other than just watching the quarterback and watching the ball, okay? Go back and watch the film and don't watch the ball at all. Watch the line. And if you come away with the conclusion that Spencer Petras had adequate time to consistently and had adequate time to consistently have a good grade in this game, then we'll just disagree. Because he didn't. He didn't. All right. And again, that's not me protecting Spencer. That is my honest take with no affiliation to Spencer Petras whatsoever. Now, a lot of people are getting on Phil Parker also in my Twitter mentions. Purdue has schemed Iowa better than any other team in the Big Ten. One of the reasons why that has been the case is because Purdue's offensive scheme is in the neighborhood of where Iowa's defense has exploitable areas on the field. And you heard me talk about this a couple of weeks ago. The flats in the flat routes and crossers. Those are the 2 areas that a team can make deposits in and move down the field if they have patient quarterback play. And if they have quarterback play that doesn't get too greedy and doesn't try to throw the ball into areas where it's dangerous, and that's over the linebackers and in front of the safeties. Today was an absolute masterclass on how to do it. But Purdue still had to go out there and execute it, and they did. And you tip your cap to them. They put 24 points on the board. Didn't get 25, so that statistic is still alive. But they did a fantastic job. Another thing that came up a lot in the mentions today is why or how do you let David Bell, get that open that often? 11 receptions for 240 yards on 12 targets. Only one target did he not catch. People saying Iowa needs to do something differently on defense. Okay. My question is, such as, what should they be doing differently on defense? So I pose that to people. Well, they need to man more. They need to get out of that zone. First and foremost, they don't play that. Now, they'll play man-to-man in a cover zero situation, which they did in the first and second quarters, and they got torched. You don't want to cover zero Purdue because then your corners are in chase mode going across the middle of the field, and the corners are giving inside release, right? You don't give outside release. You're shading your guy to make an inside cut. He's already running downhill on you, okay? And if you're in man and he's going across the middle and he's already got a head start on you, one of the best receivers in college football, you're not going to catch him. So that's dumb. You don't do that. You don't do that. You force the other quarterback to be uncomfortable and get the ball out of his hands early while you're in your zone. You don't all of a sudden for one game start doing things that you don't do at any other point in time in the season. Because A, there's no guarantee and also a high likelihood that it's going to be unsuccessful. You stay with what you do and who you are, which has consistently been one of the best defenses year in, year out in college football. And that is also the case today. It didn't help to have Riley Moss out of the game. But I don't know how much different things would have been, actually. I'm not saying that's why Iowa lost, because it's not. Iowa lost because its offense couldn't move the ball because its offensive line is just not developing the way that it needs to or the way that I expected. And maybe that expectation is on me, but I'm just going on the history of watching Iowa develop offensive lines. I will say that Petrus is sacked 4 times today. I think he might be on pace to be sacked more than any quarterback since Jake Christensen in 2007, maybe. And Jake was like up over 40 that year. By the way, Pro Football Focus last week prior to this game, Iowa's pass blocking ranking in college football was 99th out of 130. Now, Rutgers was 100, Wisconsin was 101, Nebraska was 124. And those are the 4 worst pass blocking units in the Big Ten. But Iowa's pass blocking was 99th. So, listen, I came here with receipts in addition to what I'm seeing. The whole do something different, Phil. He did a number of things in this game. They just didn't work. Here is where there is a red line, a danger zone for Iowa on defense. It's not going to be every week that the front 4 are going to be able to both control the running game as well as get adequate pressure on the opposing team's quarterback. That doesn't happen a ton. And this defense, this defensive line, doesn't have 4 dudes on it. It's the no-name defensive line, and I love them all. They play so well and so well connected with their back 7 because they're playing assignment defense and plugging their gaps, okay? But they couldn't get pressure to make Purdue's quarterback feel uncomfortable today. Aiden O'Connell, who was 30 of 40 for 375 yards, 2 touchdowns. By the way, that was one takeaway I had. No, never mind. Doesn't matter. Stats are for losers on days like today. Back to my point, what was the point that I was talking about? There you go. That's a failure on me talking about, making them feel uncomfortable. Iowa's defense. They couldn't get pressure with their front four today. That's danger zone against this type of offense. And then Braum having a bye week and being able to scheme with his offense that's already kind of the kryptonite for Iowa's defense. Does Northwestern with Dan Persa ring a bell, anyone? Now, I'm not comparing O'Connell to Persa. Persa was a better quarterback than O'Connell at this point in time. But Northwestern's offensive approach connected against Iowa's defensive approach, Northwestern wants to live with those underneath crossers and those soft, flat areas. That's where Northwestern wants to live. That's where Purdue wants to live. And some days when you don't get pressure or enough pressure, it's going to get you. So today was one of those days where Iowa front four couldn't get enough pressure. That meant that Phil had to bring linebackers. At times he was bringing a double red dog with two linebackers, weren't getting home. At times it was just one, wasn't being effective. It wasn't making O'Connell uncomfortable enough. And he had a lot of time. And folks, it's a simple game. It's a simple game. People make this much harder than it really is in reality. Purdue's strength and how they want to play. Iowa has some areas. There's no such thing as a perfect defense. You can't shut everything down. And as we talked about before, you can't just start playing man-to-man defense with your corners all out there, and you can't double team. It's not like Bell's the only guy on the field. It's difficult to double team a guy like that without leaving yourself exposed elsewhere. Now, I guess some of you could say they should, but that's like a triangle and two or a box and one in basketball, except you can't really do that in football. Can you shade somebody over? Sure. Can you roll a safety over? Yes. But it leaves you hurting elsewhere. I mean, O'Connell had 30 completions. 11 of them went to Bell. But that meant that 19 of them went elsewhere. Sheffield had 8. Durham had 5. I mean, yeah, would you rather pick your poison there? Sure, but you can't dictate things like that in football. And Iowa is not ever going to go away from what it is and who they are. And who they are and what it is has been exceptional on defense. Iowa, that's the secret sauce to Iowa's defensive system. It's basic. Iowa's running this 75 to 80% the same defense that they were running in 2004. But players don't have to change from year to year what the new sexy defensive approach is going to be because they run the same damn thing all the time. Every year, it allows them to play faster, younger, because all they do all the time is drill the same thing. Folks, some days you lose. Some days that pain in the ass matchup comes along that you lose to. There's a reason why now Purdue has won 4 of 5 against Iowa. Why Jeff Braum, 25% of his Big Ten wins are against Iowa. There's a reason for that. Is it because your favorite football program sucks? No, it's not. It's because there are different courses for different horses, and some of them run better playing against different things. Purdue is Iowa's kryptonite right now, the same as Northwestern can be. And I've told you why that is. It's frustrating. But the part that can't be a D grade is your offense. Can't be. I mean, have they had a grade higher than a C but one time this year against Maryland? And even then, Iowa had a ton of turnovers that they were able to gain. It's the offensive line. And I don't care if it's Petrus or the backups. I don't care. It'd be like you just bought a house, all right? And you've been living in it for 3 months. And every time it rained, your basement's filling with water because your inspector didn't somehow notice the significant foundation problems of this house that require 10 to 12 piers in order to reinforce your foundation. But you're pissed off because the landscaper planted petunias as opposed to mums. It's the foundation, dummy. Not you, dummy. It's just general. It's the royal dummy, the we dummy. Okay. It's the foundation. If your foundation is got cracks in it, who cares about the landscaping? Who cares? So I don't care what quarterback's in there today. They're in trouble. They're going to have trouble moving the ball when at 1.5 seconds, Karlaftis is in their face, and not just him. Okay? Not just him. Now, that said, do I feel that Iowa's offensive attack is antiquated and archaic? You damn right I do. Have I gone on a diatribe this year about Iowa's zone blocking team and other teams just pounding the boundary against Iowa, knowing what's coming? No, I haven't, because I'm tired of that. Go listen to the other 110 times I've done it. So it's frustrating, but I can at the same time be frustrated while also being understanding that sometimes there are horses for courses. And yeah, it sucks. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you should feel better about anything that I've said. That's not what this is about. This isn't me making excuses to try and spin it that Iowa should still be considered one of the 2 to 5 best teams in the country. They're not. This was the underscoring that they're not. It's felt a lot like gold the last week. Maybe it was a bit of fool's gold because these foundation problems were there. And I will admit to this, I've been really hopeful that the line was going to continue to grow and make strides. If you remember back to the post Iowa State podcast that I did, I talked about how excited I was because normally Iowa loses games in September that they shouldn't lose because their line is still developing, and they lose a game that they shouldn't lose. They lose that stinker that you didn't see coming. And I thought that by week 7, that stinker was going to be in the rearview mirror. If you lose in Madison, it's understandable, okay? But not at home to Purdue. It's hard, even though Purdue schemes them well. If Iowa's offensive line was at a point where I thought they'd be through 7 games, and that point wasn't like 2002 level or even 2008 level, just fairness level average, I think they probably win the game today. But it wasn't, so they didn't. Your offense is going to have to win a game for you. We've all known this was coming. At some point in time, the offense is going to have to win because the defense was going to scuffle. Purdue had 464 yards and 24 points. Folks, there's a lot of teams in this sport that would love their scoring defense to give up 24. I mean, even as hard as it was today at times to watch, Iowa's defense still kept it in the game. Obviously, there was a break when the one ball touched the pylon and went out of the hands and it was touched back. But Iowa's offense couldn't do anything with it. So I am not sitting here telling you all how to feel. I'm not. You feel however you want to feel. And I'm sure there's been some things I've said in this podcast that some of you didn't like. And that's okay. That's okay. You're not paying me anything for it, so caveat emptor. And there was somebody that tweeted at me something along the lines of, John, I know you've talked a lot about the advance the brand type of games. Well, this basically undid all the good of last week's victory over Penn State. And I respectfully disagree with that. Doesn't mean you have to agree with me, but I disagree with that notion. I don't think this undoes all the good from last week, because try to separate yourself and put yourself in someone else's shoes, because the advance the brand game, the advance the brand concept that I've been talking about forever is all about getting to that next level of recruiting floor. Okay. Iowa can get to that top 10 recruiting ceiling every now and again. Rarity, but it's happened. It's raising that recruiting floor so that your floor is no longer 45th or 35th best recruiting class in the country. Your floor is 25th. That's to me what the raise and elevate and advance the brand notion is about. It's raising the floor. So while Iowa lost today, last weekend was still one of the biggest recruiting weekends in school history. Last weekend still happened. Iowa still won in one of the most raucous environments these kids will ever see, ever experience. And if you read many of their comments on either Rivals or 247 last week, you saw exactly what I told you that you were going to see when we did the post-game show last week. Iowa losing to Purdue doesn't all make Xavier Wampa all of a sudden go, maybe I shouldn't go to Iowa. I don't think that's the case. Maybe that insane place that I visited last week where I felt more feelings than I've ever felt, maybe that didn't happen. Yeah, it did happen. It did happen. As fans, it hurts more to us, okay? It hurts more to us than it does to a recruit who's weighing multiple options. Unless those kids grew up as diehard Iowa fans, and those kids are likely coming to Iowa anyway, okay? The kids that don't have this connection to Iowa per se, the Caden Proctors, the Xavier Wampas. Do you think? Well, I don't want to ask that question right now. I've already gone down the road. I just don't think that it matters as much. I know that it doesn't matter as much to them as it does to you. That doesn't mean I was getting either of those players. After last week's game, I mean, if you would have made me bet $1,000 on where Xavier was going, and if you would have forced me to bet 1,000, I would have had shaky hands on Iowa. I still think it's up in the air. But today's loss doesn't take away all the good from last week relative to recruiting. Iowa had a showcase weekend last week on their biggest recruiting weekend in school history, and they rolled out the red carpet. And the experience that happened that day, you can't pay for, you can't plan for, and you can't. It happened. Today happened too, but it's not a killer. All right. Iowa gets a bye week. Man, that is tough going into a bye week with a loss like this. These guys just want to get back out there and get that feeling out of their mouths. It'll be interesting to listen to the washed up walk-ons this week to hear them talk about that fact. What's it like going into a bye week with a loss? I can't recall if those guys did, but oof. And then you have Wisconsin after that, which the Wisconsin style, when they don't have a Jonathan Taylor, I'm much more confident. It was 7-0 in the first quarter today. And I started to tweet this and then I deleted it. I think I deleted it. Maybe I think I just texted it to my brother and Barney. I said I would much rather play Michigan than Purdue. I just would. I'd much rather almost play Penn State again than Purdue because of the style differences, because of the if Purdue's on and Iowa isn't rushing with 4 and Iowa's offensive line is rough, Purdue style is more problematic. Wisconsin without an all Big Ten caliber running back and an offensive line that is still nowhere near their standard, I feel a lot better about that game than I do. That Iowa can still win the rest of their regular season games and win the Big Ten West, right? If they win the rest of their regular season games and Purdue loses one more, which they will go to Indianapolis. That's the simple math right now. Playoff stuff, probably not worth talking about right now. There's still a path, but it is it's a narrow path. And those of you on the Twitter Spaces here, there's quite a few of you. Many of you are requesting to speak, and I appreciate that. And we will do that. I will start taking some calls with this going forward. I just don't feel like it today because honestly, I've done a number of call-in shows like this, off of a loss like this, and every time I would leave the house to go into the radio station after Iowa would lose to do a show like this, I loathed it. So I don't have to do that anymore. Okay. So it's not personal. It's not you. It's me. So frankly, we probably all could use a little bit of a mental break as well. But I appreciate the interest. I really, really do. And if you're just getting here late on this, you'll be able to listen to the podcast when I get that uploaded later tonight after watching another sci-fi movie with my daughter. But yeah, I'm not gonna. I was 6-1. They'll probably still be in the top 10. Okay, and ask yourself this question and try to be objective. And I know it's difficult right now, right on the heels of a loss like this. If I would have told you, oh no, I didn't want him to say I would have told you. If I would have told you before the season began that after 7 weeks, Iowa would be ranked 10th in the nation, you probably would have said, okay, that likely means they're 6-1 to be 10th because they started out 17th. Okay. I would have taken that. I would have taken being 6-1. I hemmed and hawed with this team with the over under at 8.5, and I leaned to the under. So as anything in life, a lot of this comes back to what your expectations were. I don't know anybody who expected this team to go 12-0. The pain exists today because all of a sudden we saw the path for it, and the path was far more likely now than it was before the season began. So I get that. When I was younger, I used to really lean on that and say, hey, if your preseason expectations was this and you got this, then what's your problem? It's more nuanced than that. So I recognize that. But Iowa is 6-1, going to be top 10-ish for 2 more weeks. And they get a chance to go to Madison to exercise some of these demons. And if they win in Madison, then game on. If they lose in Madison, okay, maybe they are what we thought they were. Maybe not. Still a lot of football to be played. So don't do anything rash. Don't do anything stupid. Don't kick your dog. The sun is coming up tomorrow, and I've got an 8 o'clock tea time. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to watching a sci-fi movie with my daughter tonight, like I did last night. So, hey, those of you that listen to this in any format, I appreciate it. If some of us butted heads tonight, I know I was the only one speaking, but, I said some things probably that, ruffled feathers. We'll get over it. No big deal. And appreciate you all being here, and we will talk to you soon.